And so there's a huge correlation with the HPA axis, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenaline axis, and the gut axis, and the sex hormones axis. But ultimately, how we perceive the world, how we perceive the environment, how we respond to stressors will ultimately dictate immediately how our gut either absorbs food, digests food, or assimilates food, or does not absorb food and digest food.
Welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. I'm your host, Lee Brandon. This work started for me several decades ago when I started to see the impact I could make on people, helping them to identify the root cause of their health problems that no doctor could figure out, including serious back, knee, shoulder and neck injuries, acne and eczema issues, severe gut health problems, even helping couples get pregnant after several IVF treatments had failed. And it really moves me to be able to help people in this way. And that is why I do what I do and why we have this show. In this episode of the Radical Health Rebel podcast, Brendan Coates shares his transformative journey into gut health and human behavior, detailing how personal health challenges led him to pursue education in clinical nutrition and functional medicine. He discusses the intricate connection between gut health and emotional well-being, emphasizing the impact of stress on digestion and overall health. Brendan debunks common myths surrounding digestion and offers actionable steps for listeners to begin healing their gut. He also addresses the reasons behind relapse in health journeys and highlights the importance of pursuing one's purpose for lasting change. The conversation concludes with insights into the upcoming Longevity Expo, aimed at educating the public on health and wellness. Brendan Coates, welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Lee. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And to get things started, can you share a little bit about your academic background and your professional journey, and what inspired you to dive into gut health and human behavior?
It's a loaded question. How far back do you want to go?
All the way.
All the way. Okay.
All the way.
I was living in the Caribbean. I owned my own party boat company in Jamaica, and then I moved to Cayman Islands, and I pursued that for a little while. And then when I moved back to Canada, I was hit by a ton of allergies. My eyes and nose were watering like a runny faucet. I was going through a box of Reactin every week. It was horrible. And I was also in the nightclub industry. So it was, not great dealing with customers and clients with just a, red face full of allergies and stuffiness and inflammation. So I pursued my mentor at the time, Dr. Nandor Bajuz. And I was also dealing with a little bit of gut issues, but nothing that I was consciously aware of. I had previously had strep throat many seasons in a row. I was a hockey player and baseball player. So in Canada, in the months of March and April, it's a change of climates. And so that continuously brought on strep throat. So there's a few things. And when I sought him out, he said, "Coatsers, you've got a leaky gut." And I said, "What does my allergies have anything to do with a leaky gut?" And he just, "Let me educate you." And so I went to his office. We had an in-depth 3-hour consultation, and he taught me what leaky gut was. He taught me everything that happened that causes a leaky gut and how it was in fact compromising my immune system, how I was unable to sort of combat the allergens that I was exposed to just throughout the air and the environment and the changing of the seasons. And so we went on a complete gut rehabilitation protocol based on his guidance. And within 7 days, all of my allergies completely went away. And he knew it was gonna happen, but I didn't. He said it was by default that by healing and sealing the gut and removing a lot of the pathogen foods and the foods that were causing ongoing inflammation and the foods that I shouldn't have been eating in the first place, all of those combined and compounded with interest, ultimately healing and sealing my gut. One of the biggest focuses in this protocol was reassessing and rehabilitating my stomach acid. Because in most cases, even in my case right now in my clinical practice, 99.9% of individuals have compromised digestion and low stomach acid. So when we improved my stomach acid, healed and sealed my gut, strengthened my immune system, changed some of the foods that I was eating, then just by default, my allergies completely went away. When I learned this, I just wanted to scream this at the top of the mountaintops. I said, how come doctors don't know this? How come modern medicine doesn't know this? How come nobody knows this? And he said, well, welcome to the world of functional medicine and quackery, as he said. And it really turned on a light bulb in my mind. And at the same time, like I said, I was working in the nightclub industry. A woman came up to me at one point and she asked, how can you teach me to lose weight? And I said, I can do that. So we sat down for about 15 minutes and I told her everything that I knew, how to practice intermittent fasting, strategic eating, how to do exercises, weightlifting, cardiovascular exercises, basic supplements. And at the end of the conversation, she gave up, or she stood up, gave me a big, big hug, and she pulled out $100 bill. She said, thank you. You just saved my life. And that was another light bulb that turned on. I said, wow, okay, this is my true calling. I can help people. And so I went back to my mentor, Dr. Nandor, and he said, Coatsers, you got to go to school. You've got to understand this if you want to help people. So that's when I went into back to school, and fast forward almost 15 years, it turned into multiple degrees, graduating with honors and being on the dean's list, and ultimately getting my doctorate degree in clinical nutrition and functional medicine certification. So that's where I am now in terms of my education. And then I decided to pursue human behavior. I'm a longtime student of Dr. John Demartini's. He's a human behavioral expert. I've been a student of his for 18 years now. And being able to identify and understand the autonomic nervous system and how our perceptions ultimately govern our body's physiology. And then with my expertise in gut health and functional medicine, I've been able to marry and integrate the two into quite the successful practice. And I'm able to help people all around the world. So that's where I am now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, in some ways, your story is quite similar to mine in that I've been into the science of the mind and behavior change in particular for, I'm guessing, about 27 years now. I've also studied functional medicine. And interestingly, as you were speaking there and you were talking about, healing the gut and allergies went away, I've had that experience with multiple clients that have come to me for whatever condition, but not the allergy, right? So say it's hay fever or whatever it might be. And then we start on the process to, let's say they've got constipation or diarrhea or whatever it might be. And then one day they come in and they'll say, I've just gone through the whole of spring and I didn't have hay fever this year. Like, what's changed? So even without trying to help people with allergies, I've helped people with allergies just by the same kind of process that you were just talking about.
Great. Well, here's the thing. If hay fever was the culprit, or if grass was the culprit, then every single person would be walking around allergic to those plants. But that's not the case. It's just individual bodies are unable to cope with some of those allergens, and those are just the tipping point. So it's not the culprit. It's actually a solution that's providing feedback to let us know what in fact is going wrong. But most people just don't know how to decipher the symptom.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, I kind of had a hypothesis a long time ago, and I'm not sure my mind has changed since then, but it seemed to me that there were so many, let's call them stressors on the body. The body can handle a certain amount of stressors before it will start to exhibit symptoms.
Sure.
So if you start to take away some of those stressors, now you've, if you like, increased the threshold before someone's going to experience symptoms. That's kind of my hypothesis, certainly I'm probably thinking, 20 years ago that I was seeing those kind of clients with those allergy type symptoms, and they were going away just based on improving their health, improving their gut health. So yeah, interesting. So you mentioned that you got several degrees, and you mentioned you got certification in functional medicine. What were your degrees in? Not that I think degrees are that important anyway, but I'm just intrigued to know what your degrees are in.
Yeah, all in bachelor's of science, master's of science, doctorate of science, all in clinical nutrition.
Okay.
It's interesting. My mentor, one of my mentors, he said, there are graduates from Harvard, Cornell, Yale, Princeton, all with doctorate's degrees and various degrees, and they're complete numbskulls. And those are his words. And then there are individuals that have pursued ongoing education independently, free from the dogmatic systems. And I'm from the latter as well. Although I did go to various esteemed governing bodies of education, they're not necessarily recognized by mainstream medicine. And there's a reason for that. So it's one of the things that I'm not really enthusiastic to explain or discuss is what schools I went to and what certifications I got, simply because it's almost redundant. I can show a long list of testimonials, and I can easily have dialogue with any MD or GP with regards to digestive process and the immune system and how the body works. And they'll not have as such great results that I would have with my patients and clients. So it's kind of redundant in a way. The way that the world and everything is going, we used to be in an information era, and now we're going into a knowledge era. And it's how people utilize that knowledge through application that makes it successful. Just because you've got information doesn't mean that you've got knowledge and wisdom that you can apply it. So there's a big differentiator there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's kind of why I flippantly said, not that I think the degrees are that important, because at the end of the day, the way I see it is whether you can help people or not.
Yeah.
That's the important thing. But sometimes, doing degrees like that can give you a really good background and baseline to work from,
Yeah, I could easily show you all the degrees. They're all behind me. But it's bragging rights, and they're beautiful to hang up on the wall, but it does not, it's just a symbol of the tens of thousands of hours that I've put in, early mornings, late nights, studying, writing, researching, all of that. So they go hand in hand, but it's not the end all and be all. So
yeah. Well, my friend Paul Check has got a saying for what PhD means. Don't know if you've heard him say that.
No, what's that? But I have a very tremendous amount of respect for Paul. That's what I was saying earlier on.
Yeah. So he says a PhD stands for piled higher and deeper.
There's lots of levels to that too, isn't there?
There is. And again, that's not to say that some PhDs aren't great, but
sure.
My experience in university was it didn't teach me what I needed to know.
Yeah, not much.
Yeah. So anyway, moving on, how would you explain the connection between gut health and our emotional, mental, and physical performance? Meet Julie, a 47-year-old working in computer sales who had been battling lifelong IBS. She suffered from severe abdominal pain, bloating, and frequent loose stools, low energy, brain fog, and hot flashes, all of which affected her work and quality of life. After thorough testing, we discovered the root causes: parasite infection, bacterial overgrowth, leaky gut, low digestive enzymes, and a vegetarian diet high in oxalates. With a tailored plan, Julie made dietary changes, added targeted supplements to balance her gut microbiome, and supported her digestion with prebiotics, probiotics, and enzymes. The results? Well, in Julie's words, the improvement is staggering. Her pain and bloating vanished, her energy levels soared, her brain fog and hot flashes disappeared, and her immune system became stronger than ever. If you're struggling with IBS or gut health issues, reach out today for a consultation at www.bodycheck.co.uk, and let's uncover the root cause and create a plan to transform your health.
They're connected. That's why we call our gut being the second brain. So our physiology is an expression of our psychology. And a lot of individuals might make a little bit of a conscious connection as to their mood influencing maybe their hunger cues, or their mood maybe being correlated to a low sense of energy or low libido, of course, right? Then there's also a relationship with sometimes people are able to associate their gut. Maybe they've got bloating or heartburn or indigestion. Maybe some individuals might be able to be like, well, I'm pretty angry right now, so maybe that's why I've got heartburn or something like that. But the vast majority of the population do not have the know-how or the conscious awareness that their psychology is ultimately dictating their physiology. And so that's just applied physiology. And schools don't teach that. It's not really well known. For the amount of signals that are being transmitted from the brain down to the gut, the relationship and the ratio is significantly higher from signals going from the gut all the way up the vagus nerve to the brain. And so there's a huge correlation with the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary and adrenaline axis, and the gut axis, and the sex hormones axis. But ultimately, how we perceive the world, how we perceive the environment, how we respond to stressors will ultimately dictate immediately how our gut either absorbs food, digests food, or assimilates food, or does not absorb food and digest food. So if someone's in a sympathetic state, guess what's not happening? Digestion, right? And most people, in most cases, are walking around quite stressed. They're angry, or they've got rage, or they've got resentment, or they've got frustration, or they've got possibly some anxiety towards their career or their finances or their relationship or someone that they don't want to be around or anything like that will have an immediate relation.
The government.
Or the government, sure. And how apropos is that? I know you're in London, I'm in Canada, but the amount of hatred and polarization that's being, exhibited towards the West, Trump, right? You got 50% of the world that loves him and 50% of the world that hates him. And the point of the matter is, the truth of the matter is, it's incomplete awareness. People that have a perception and an opinion towards any person on the media, it's just a small little percentage of what the person's identity truly encapsulates, right? So when someone has animosity or anger towards someone from the media, it's completely incomplete awareness. They're not consciously aware of the whole entity of that person. And so anytime there's an emotion, an emotion just means missed or an incomplete awareness of the whole situation. So it's just kind of funny when you look at the media and you look at how so many people are just polarized and angry, but they're not balanced. They don't have complete awareness. So when you've got complete awareness of any person, you're not going to have a charge on them. They're not going to stress you out. You're not going to have any depression or anxiety towards them because you've completely aware of them, right? You're aware of both sides. I know I'm going a little bit diversion here, but it's being able to recognize that when you have objectivity, you don't have any charge. There's no emotional charge. So if you're in a state of objectivity, you're not going to have any compromised digestion because the body isn't aligned. There's nothing that's either pulling you or pushing you towards fear of any capacity. And so you're balanced. Anytime someone's got incomplete awareness, it's either in a state of fear, of fear of losing something or fear of gaining something ultimately. And anytime you're in that state, digestion is not happening. So there's a big relationship with stressors and how we perceive the world around us and how we respond to stress that's directly correlated and associated with our gut.
Yeah, completely agree. And, a couple of times I've had guests on the show and they've quoted Hippocrates, saying that all health and disease begins in the gut. And I always say, is it the gut or is it in the mind, right? Because obviously we know that there's a bidirectional relationship between the gut and the brain. I'd just like to get your view. What do you think? Do you think all health and disease starts in the gut, or is it the mind, or is it something else, or is it a combination?
It's a good question. Which came first, chicken or the egg? But ultimately, when I first started, I thought that everything did stem in the gut. And it's still true. It really is. However, it's when someone's eating something. Let's say they are impulsively reaching towards that box of cookies and they say, oh my God, I can't control it. I don't know why I can't stop eating these cookies. Okay. So their symptoms might be expressing that they overate and they've got gas and bloating. Maybe there's gluten in those cookies, some dairy processed ingredients, and all of those ingredients typically will have an impact on the body, acute or over long term, right? Maybe they've got bloating. Maybe they've got a headache the next day. Maybe all of a sudden the third day they've got a pimple showing up on their face. All of those are signs and symptoms of feedback trying to let you know that you pigged out, trying to let you know that you ate food that wasn't necessarily in alignment with the body's ultimate performance. Okay, so the gut has been affected, right? We know that now we've got some transient permeability, and those food ingredients in those cookies, they damage the body, they cause some inflammation, they cause some symptoms. Okay, is that person even consciously aware of those symptoms, or are they just passing it off as getting older or whatever? So that's one. But then what were they doing in that moment or seconds before they decided to reach for those cookies or even have the impulse towards reaching those cookies? So we've got to look at neurochemistry. We've got to look at the thinking. We've got to look at what perceptions were around them, or how were they perceiving a certain stressor, a person, an activity, something that happened outside, something happened that in their environment that triggered a fear of something. Usually when someone has an impulse eating food, they're typically fearful of losing something. I don't know what that is. We'd have to look at it. But in any event, if someone is fearful of losing something, most cases they will try to reach for something that they can control. So if they're fearful of losing control, they're going to try to gain control in somewhere else. And in most cases, it's controlling food. And so all of a sudden, subconsciously, they're reaching for that food because now they feel as though that they can control that. But then all of a sudden, they've got that impulsive behavior to eat the whole thing, right? So anytime someone is fearful of something or they can't control it, ultimately, usually ghrelin will kick in. And ghrelin is one of those hunger hormones. Where in a different instance, if let's say someone is fearful of getting into an argument, or fearful of a boss coming down on them, or fearful of attracting a bully, guess what's not going to be happening? They're not going to be hungry. In fact, they're going to want to be kind of getting away from whatever that perceived stressor is. And so now all of a sudden, ghrelin decreases and leptin increases, leptin being the hormone to stimulate satiety and the not hunger cues. So again, depending on our perception of fear or our perception of the environment, then ultimately that will influence those hormones triggering us to either have hunger or have satiation. And then that's when the symptoms kick in after we've consumed the food. So ultimately what comes first? Yeah, it's the psychology, and then eventually the gut.
Yeah. So as well as thoughts, it's emotions that you were talking about there.
Yep.
In terms of gut health, so obviously we've spoken that's a bidirectional relationship between the brain and the gut. What about physical performance? How does gut health affect physical performance?
Sure. If you've got compromised digestion, if you're not absorbing all the nutrients and the fuel that you're consuming, then the machine, your external machine, is not going to be performing. So your brain is not going to be thinking adequately. Your vision might be cloudy. You might get headaches. You might get joint pain. You might be slow and rigid and stiff and in pain. Your heart might not function as optimally as it could, right? You've got sex hormones that might not be performing. So now you've got perhaps some infertility or low libido. Maybe your hormones are completely imbalanced due to the foods that you're eating and compromised digestion. So now maybe you're estrogen dominant, or your testosterone is just plummeted down to the pit. So all of these body systems are a result of either optimized or compromised digestion and the ability to absorb and assimilate nutrients. And it all starts again from perception. It starts from chewing the food. It starts from drinking beverages or carbonated beverages with your meals or without your meals. If you are in a state of sympathetic dominance, then the body's not even digesting to begin with. And so the foods that you're eating aren't even being optimized and absorbed. And then sometimes people are spending an arm and a leg on supplements, but realistically, they're not absorbing. And so they're wasting away a lot of that. And so the body is performing in response to the foods and the fuels that it's consuming. But at the same time, the body's symptomatology is expressing and trying to give feedback of what's not actually happening or what is happening. So again, that's where that applied physiology comes to take in place. So the body is beautifully demonstrating symptomatology based on digestion and lack thereof or optimized digestion.
Yeah. Yeah. As again, I'm just going to quote Paul Chek again. He talks about the pain teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
Says the body's way of giving you feedback is by symptoms.
Sure.
So the symptoms are saying, look, there's something wrong. You need to pay attention.
Yep.
And as you alluded to earlier,
not putting a Band-Aid on it or not trying to take a pill for that or suppress that or cut something out. It's always feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as you alluded to earlier, some people aren't always aware of the symptoms.
No. Well, how can anyone be aware of their symptoms if they're caught in the ongoing distraction world of TV, media, movies, gossip, instantly gratifying consumables, alcohol, drugs, narcotics, the pursuit of pleasure and avoiding of pain? All of these pursuits, hedonistic pursuits, ultimately distract you and detach you from your mind, body, and soul. And I don't know if Paul Chek exactly says that, but I know that he practices that, right? It's the mind-body connection. And so the symptoms are feedback, but if the mind and the body are disconnected and if you're distracted, you're just not going to be able to understand and listen to that communication. But it's beautiful dialogue if you can tune in. And I'm sure that's what you're teaching. And that's ultimately what I teach. And I know that's what Paul teaches, is just being able to detach from the outside world as much as you can and really hone in and listen to your body. And if you do, then the body will have beautiful dialogue with yourself and you'll be able to understand what the symptoms are.
Yeah, one of my favorite books, and I mean, I'm going to show how much of a nerd I am, but one of my favorite books is called The Gift of Pain, right? Because it's explaining how pain is a gift to you to teach you where you need to pay attention.
Sure.
Right. So, as an analogy, if you step on a nail, right, there's some attention seeking, right, from what we would call your subconscious mind to your conscious mind, because obviously you're not going to consciously step on something sharp, right?
Right.
But as soon as you step on it, now you've got, pain receptors sending signals to your brain to say, oh, there's something sharp. Don't continue putting weight down on your foot because it's going to go straight through your foot.
Sure.
But to look at that a different way, that's also the case with chronic conditions as well. Chronic conditions, let's say rheumatoid arthritis as an example, right? The pain that you're experiencing is trying to get your attention and point you in the direction of some imbalance that's going on in your body right now. The challenge for most people is to interpret what that signal is actually saying and then being able to do the right thing to bring the body back into balance.
Yeah, well, and there's nutritional components to that, and then there's psychological components. Oftentimes when people have rheumatoid arthritis, there creates a lot of rigidity in their joints. Okay, well, where are they being rigid in their life? Whom are they being rigid to? And so that's feedback, right? The body is trying to display symptoms so that rigidity can maybe be dismantled and appreciated and acknowledged. Again, where are they rigid in their life? And oftentimes when someone associates their symptomatology to their mindset, and if they're able to balance that mindset, the symptoms will balance themselves too.
Yeah. Again, the way I look at it is like, you have to learn the language of the body.
Sure.
You have to be able to understand what the body is trying to tell you. And that's where, people like yourself are able to help people, let's say, interpret the symptomology that the person is experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And then potentially able to give them the right roadmap to be able to create or recreate balance back in their life.
Yep. That's the goal. That's the objective.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there are plenty of misconceptions out there, or what are some kind of, well, let me rephrase that. So there are a lot of misconceptions. What are some of the biggest myths that you hear about digestion, bloating, and chronic fatigue? Amanda spent 19 years battling severe IBS, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. Her life was ruled by public toilets, and she avoided holidays for fear of flare-ups. Doctors offered no solutions, just endless Imodium. After working together, Amanda discovered the root causes of her symptoms, and in just 3 months, she was IBS-free. She even booked her first holiday with her husband, a dream come true. If you're struggling like Amanda, visit www.bodycheck.co.uk to schedule your consultation. Let's find the root cause and get your life back.
In terms of what necessarily?
What would you say are the biggest myths, misconceptions around digestion, bloating, and chronic fatigue?
Well, with regards to misconceptions towards bloating, a lot of individuals might think that they just need a probiotic, or a lot of individuals might think they just need to take some digestive enzymes. And sure, those are wonderful tools if utilized appropriately and strategically. Sometimes, in some cases, they might feel some improvements and the symptoms might go away. But again, there's just a lot more things to consider when looking at digestion and what's causing the gas, for example, right? So we need to really look at the immune system. We need to look at the digestive hormones and the secretions. We need to look at the stomach function. Is it adequately secreting and producing enough stomach acid? Is it adequately producing enough of the protective mucus to protect the lining of the stomach? Is there possibly an imbalance of bacteria that's going up into the small intestine and even into the stomach, right? Looking at SIBO. Right now, I'm seeing more than ever in North America individuals with SIBO, and even cases of H. pylori and antibiotic resistance. So conventional or traditional probiotics with simple lactobacillus or bifidobacterium, they're not as effective as they used to be, because the strains of pathogens and opportunistic bacteria are getting stronger. They're becoming more diverse, and they're being able to be more resistant to conventional therapies of probiotics, for example. So there's that. Another misconception is thinking that someone can do a juice cleanse and they're going to completely reset their gut. That's not the case at all. I'm a big fan of juice cleanses. Many cases, individuals won't be drinking enough juices in a juice cleanse, or they might be consuming a little bit of fruit. I'm okay with a little bit of fruit, but there needs to be some understanding, perhaps looking at yeast or candida, and if they've got that. Another misconception is that if, for example, someone finds Dr. Paul Saladino or Dr. Sean Baker and they decide to pursue the carnivore diet, it's great. It can be very, very healing. Meat in and of itself is very healing, but you're not going to reset your gut. You're not going to rehabilitate your stomach to its optimum capacity if you just go carnivore. Meat is very difficult to digest, especially if you've got compromised digestion and you're not secreting the adequate juices and enzymes to break down those proteins. But again, it's a wonderful tool. So that's where my protocol, it's very, very systematic and methodical. So we really address all of the systems in chronological order. So one is not being missed by the other. Where, in my humble opinion, a lot of practitioners, they're using pieces of the puzzle, but they're not completing the puzzle. So there's a lot of people with a lot of misconceptions towards gut health. A lot of people are applying great tools and strategies, but they're still missing some of the components where we really need to look at the body holistically and ultimately understand all of the systems. I see a ton of hormones coaches out there that know nothing about gut health or very, very little, right? And they know, or they've been taught how to help someone's hormones with some specific herbs or adaptogens or some minerals or vitamins. But if they're not absorbing and they're not absorbing the foods that they're consuming, how are they going to address their hormones? Ultimately, it's not going to happen. It's a dog chasing its tail.
Yeah. So you mentioned a few things there. I was just writing them down.
Sure.
So you mentioned you've seen like an increased amount of bloating. I think you said SIBO, H. pylori. Did you say antibiotic resistance?
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
Because we need to remind ourselves that foods are being sprayed with antibiotics. Animals are being prematurely injected with antibiotics so that they don't get sick, right? And we're consuming these antibiotics. So yeah, I'm seeing a lot of major antibiotic resistance.
Yeah. Are you familiar with a documentary called Invisible Extinction?
I am not.
It's a really, really good movie. I had the producer on the show.
Okay.
Stephen Lawrence, his name.
Mm.
And the movie was about the fact that they believe that we're on the cusp of a lot of our gut microbiome becoming extinct because of all the huge use of antibiotics.
Mm-hmm.
And predominantly in the food supply, not just from the pharmaceutical industry, but it is from the pharmaceutical industry, but via our food supply rather than direct from a medical doctor. It's a really, really good movie, actually.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah, it's really good. So, in terms of increased amounts of bloating, SIBO, H. pylori, why do you think that's the case? You've got any views on that?
Sure. Well, like I said, foods are being sprayed with antibiotics. We're consuming factory farmed meats. We are living in an environment with ongoing pollution and pollutants, plastics, metals. So the body is getting sicker and sicker and sicker, disabling essentially the immune system and disabling the stomach acid. That's my pinnacle of my approach. It's obviously the mindset and psychology, but it's stomach acid because 99% of people are walking around with low stomach acid. And if you've got low stomach acid, you're not able to start to prime and initiate all of the rest of the digestive sequences that go downstream. As well as if you've got low stomach acid, you're not able to protect and essentially zap or kill off the pathogens at immediate exposure. Most cases of food poisoning, for example, if someone has adequate stomach acid, their taste receptors and their scent receptors are even heightened just because of adequate stomach acid. And so most cases when someone gets stomach acid or food poisoning, it's because A, they didn't have the senses strong enough to identify that the food had either gotten rancid or putrefied, or there was some bacterial pathogens on it that were going to result in sickness, as well as if they consumed it right away, that should have triggered the danger response. But also those pathogens should have been killed in the stomach's environment of the hydrochloric acid. And because they don't have the adequate stomach acid, again, the receptors, their heightened sense has been desensitized, if you will. So of course, they're going to be eating foods that they normally, in their primitive state, would have been aware that, okay, I can't eat that. That's going to be dangerous. That's going to cause sickness. That's why bitters are so good before a meal. If someone's got compromised digestion, if you just taste some bitters, that's going to initiate the digestive process through a primitive protective survival mechanism. So I think ultimately, the reason why so many of us are sick is the foods, the environment, eating habits, lifestyle, plastics, metals. It's just a beautiful recipe for disaster, really.
Uh, yeah, I guess the other thing would be stress as well, right? I mean, certainly the last 5 years, I think most people's stress levels have gone up, which again, we've already covered that. That's gonna have a great effect on the digestive system.
Well, and on that, we need to look at what types of stressors there are. There's foods that are on the end of the fork. That's a stress. There's our perceptions, our environment, our lifestyle choices. Most people are living a very unfulfilled life. They are not pursuing their ontological purpose. As Aristotle coins it, their telos, right? There's a whole study called teleology, and it's the study of the end in mind, right? What is ultimately your chief aim, as Napoleon Hill calls it? And when someone is living a life on purpose and they are pursuing their ontological purpose and they're pursuing something that's truly, truly inspiring to them, and they've linked it to a lifelong pursuit of betterment and what they want to do and how they want to leave a mortal/immortal legacy, then they're not in a state of stress, right? That's called eustress, when you actively pursue things that challenge and support you, where most people are in a state of distress. They are pursuing things that are uninspiring. They're not pursuing their ontological purpose. They've got stress all around them and they don't know how to cope and they don't know how to navigate. So success leaves clues. So when people are pursuing their highest purpose or their highest value or their ontological purpose, those types of individuals typically aren't sick. They've got eustress. It's a choice. Where again, people that are not pursuing things that are inspiring, they've got distress. So it's finding what you love and pursuing that, and then your body will change. Your body will respond.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to quote Paul Chek again. He says the body has within it 4 doctors, and the most important one is called Doctor Happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it's being clear on what your dream, goal, or objective is in life. And he often quotes Jerry Wesh,
Okay.
who says, "If you have a big enough dream, you don't need a crisis." Ian, a semi-professional footballer, spent over 3 years plagued with a recurring groin injury. Despite consulting 5 physiotherapists, 2 sports physicians, and even undergoing surgery, his pain persisted. Every time he thought he was on the road to recovery, the injury would return, leaving him frustrated and disheartened. Ian had spent thousands on treatments that offered only temporary relief. He worried that his playing days were over until he decided to give it one last shot and came to see me. Through detailed assessments, I identified the root causes of Ian's injury, which were imbalances and weaknesses that hadn't been addressed by previous treatments. I designed a personalized exercise program targeting his specific needs, while also focusing on essential lifestyle factors to optimize his recovery. The results were transformational. Ian is now back on the pitch, stronger and fitter than ever. Not only has his groin injury healed, but he's also full of energy, sharper in his movements, and more confident in his abilities. If a long-standing injury is keeping you on the sidelines, visit www.bodycheck.co.uk to schedule your consultation. Let's get to the root of the problem and help you get back to the sport you love.
Yeah. Crisis we can use strategically. However, it's how we perceive the crisis, right? And so what some person who goes through a crisis might not think that it's that much of a crisis at all, might find that it was a blessing. Where another individual might experience the exact same crisis and now they think it's the end of the world. That's why if you go in courts and there's several eyewitnesses, all of their statements are going to be completely different because it's how they perceive is going to be completely different. So crises can be used strategically. It's just how we perceive them.
Yeah, completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So for people that are feeling overwhelmed, what would you say are some simple, actionable steps that they can take to begin healing their gut?
If you're feeling overwhelmed and you don't know where to begin, I think the easiest and wisest strategy would be close your eyes and ask what your higher self wants or is trying to communicate. One of my friends and mentors, he says that he tries to make decisions based on if his past ancestors would be proud or if they would judge his decisions. And also he makes his decisions based on his future generations and how he's sort of paving the way for them. When I heard that, I was like, wow, that's deep. I appreciate that. It's being able to identify and tune into your body. That's one thing. And ultimately, when it comes to nutrition, just simplify the foods that you're consuming. If it's coming in I don't have any boxes with me, but if it comes in a box, probably wise not to eat it. But it comes from a plant or an animal, might be an easy strategy to consume that.
Yeah.
Right? The more simpler our lives become with regards to nutrition, the more our body starts to respond beautifully. But the more complex the foods are, the more it challenges our body. Our bodies are very, very, although magnificently intricate and infinitely complex, as one of my mentors said, the body and your health shouldn't be. So if you simplify your diet, your body will respond accordingly. So if you're confused and you're overwhelmed, just try to do an assessment of the foods that you're consuming. Where are you going? What are you eating? How often are you eating out? How often are you having these big, 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 beautiful, but colorful meals with tons of ingredients? You might want to just try simplifying it, eating maybe 1 or 2 or 3 ingredients at a time, and just paying attention to your body. See how it responds. See how you think. See how you feel. See how you sleep. And then if you've got some success, just double down on that. It's not necessarily glamorous, but success leaves clues. So whatever works, just double down on that.
Yeah. I mean, on a similar vein to what you've just said, I often encourage people to buy foods of one ingredient, right? If you buy an apple, it's an apple,
Just an
right?
apple.
Unless it's got Bill Gates' wax on it, that's another story. If you buy beef, generally, although you have to check, it's probably just beef, right? I was horrified. I was in California once and I picked up some beef and I just so happened to turn it over and it said beef and sugar.
Wow.
What? Like, why would you put sugar with beef? Like, but yeah, if you buy one ingredient, you're simplifying things, and B, you're probably ensuring that there's not the things that you shouldn't be eating.
Of course.
Right? Like you said, if you buy something in a box, it's probably going to have sugar in it, probably going to have seed oils in it, right?
Yep.
Probably going to have gluten in it. But just people go, oh, I haven't got time, And what's the old saying? If you don't have time for your wellness, you're going to have time for your illness.
With regards to that, it's, again, finding your purpose, finding your ontological purpose and your highest value and your chief aim in pursuing that. Because and I say this to my clients, let's just say your listenership and your viewership are listening right now and watching. And let's say your wheelhouse is whatever topic that you want. And you've been asked to do a keynote speak or a keynote talk on that topic. And let's just say, because I've got in front of me another iPhone, let's say it's AI and you love talking about AI, or maybe I've got someone's results here on their gut tests. Maybe you're enthusiastic about fishing worms, whatever the case may be. But let's say you've got an opportunity to do a keynote talk to 1,000 people, and it's your wheelhouse, your highest level of authority and education, and you know it. Guaranteed, that individual is going to be very selective with the foods that they're consuming for the next 5 days, because they know that they're doing their first keynote talk and they want to perform as best as they can. They want their brain to remember the content and they want to be on fire when they're delivering that keynote talk. And so, isn't that appropriate when someone is pursuing their highest purpose? An athlete, for example, typically will eat based on the performance outcome that they want, right? Typically. Okay, so if you are pursuing everyday high priority actions that inspire you, every day you're essentially performing. You're performing. And so you eat according to that performance. where again, most people, they're not pursuing things that are internally inspiring to them. They're not on their chief aim. And so they're eating in a reactive sort of response, and they're eating foods that don't necessarily allow them to perform. It's more so reactive. So if you are pursuing things that are absolutely inspiring to you, you're going to eat foods that complement your efforts and complement the desired outcome. So most people, they're not connected to their highest chief aim. They're not on their ontological purpose. And so they're just eating foods that are just serving them on a day-to-day basis. Very, very survival, not thrival. And so when you're pursuing things that are inspiring, now you've got a life mission. And now you're living a life on purpose, and you're consuming foods appropriate to that performance.
Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree. So it's having that big dream.
Yeah.
It's having that life purpose that you're aiming for.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other thing that's really important is to keep that in the forefront of your mind every day as well, because it's easy. It's easy to let that slip.
Sure.
And then the other thing that a process that I take my clients through is, right, okay, this is what you want to achieve. What we now need to do is, or you need to do, is to set some core values that it's almost like your set of guidelines or set of rules that you're going to live your life by in order to achieve that goal.
Sure.
Right. And it doesn't mean you have to eat perfect every day. Right. I don't eat perfect every day, maybe 349 days a year, maybe something along those lines. Yeah. And, I love Indian food. I love Thai food, but it doesn't like me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll have it occasionally knowing what the consequences will be. But I'm happy with that. That's my core value. And it doesn't push me too far off of my track. Right. But I think that's just a really important part of the process, is that you have that goal, you keep it in your mind, and you have a set of values that you live your life by in order to achieve that.
Absolutely.
And for most people, I find that's quite a powerful and effective tool to enable people to do that.
Well, and another tool to complement that is being able to link what it is that they're trying to pursue and linking that to their values, linking the activity to whatever their ontological purpose is. So let's say, for example, you want to lose weight and you're really challenged with going on the treadmill 5 days a week. Okay, I get that. That could be a challenge. But how does going on the treadmill 5 days a week, how does that allow you to be, let's say, a better mom? And someone's like, oh, well, maybe just makes me a little bit healthier. Okay, well, that's one. How about finding 20 or 30 or 40 benefits? How does the act of going on the treadmill help you become a better mom? Right? All of these new benefits, you start to stack them. And you're like, oh, wow, I can really see how this is benefiting my child, creating better habits. My child is now going to see me being rigid and consistent with my scheduling. All of a sudden, I'm going to lose weight. It's going to improve my heart health. It's going to improve my joint pain. So now I can show up and play with my kids a little bit more. All of these things, you can stack it. So yeah, it's just being able to link the benefits to whatever it is their values are. And that's just going to increase probability for their own success too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just moving on from that.
Sure.
Why do you feel that people seem to relapse after trying things like, elimination diets, taking supplements, or going through detox protocols? What's your view on that?
Sure. There's a difference between extrinsic motivation and inspired inspiration. Most people are pursuing things that require validation or consequence or reward, ultimately. And so their behavior is based on reward or consequence. Where an individual that's pursuing something that's truly inspiring, they don't need reward or consequence. They don't need someone motivating them to tell them to do that thing or else, right? There's no consequence. There's no reward. There's just pursuit of something that's inspiring. So again, it's going to values. Ultimately, there's also an educational component with regards to relapse. Most people don't have the true in-depth understanding of, let's say, their body, or let's say, what are the immediate and secondary, tertiary, quaternary consequences of eating that food? What is it doing to your immune system? What is it doing to your body? And when someone truly understands the consequences of consuming a certain food, chances are that they're not going to want to consume it, or they're going to do their best to avoid it for the obvious reasons. But if you don't know really in depth of what's the consequences are to eating those foods, then you're not really aware. And so the likeliness of you consuming that, it's probably going to happen. Where if it's like a non-negotiable hard no because you've got knowledge, rate of relapse isn't going to happen. And again, we need to ask ourselves, what was the person doing in the moment of relapse? Who were they with? What was the environment? Were they pursuing their ontological purpose? Chances are they weren't. And so I've got thousands of hours in addiction consulting various different clinics. Relapse, again, is feedback for the person to recognize that what they were doing wasn't on purpose. And so relapse is it's a built-in program to allow them to catch that as feedback to get back into alignment. And so the act of addictive behavior, that's just a beautiful program of feedback to show signals to the person that what they're doing isn't inspiring. And so if that addiction is, again, wonderful, beautiful feedback, trying to get you back into alignment. So the addiction, believe it or not, or the substance, that's actually a temporary solution. It's not the problem. It's a temporary solution. And so when someone has addiction or when someone is pursuing or they're in a relapse, we need to identify, okay, well, what is it that they're pursuing and why are they doing that? What's the benefit? They got to be getting something out of it, whether it's a disconnect or it's calming or it makes them feel included or it makes them kind of forget the past, whatever the case may be. We need to identify what's the serving of that purpose. And that's ultimately identifying it's a sub-addiction, right? So whenever there's an addiction, there's a sub-addiction. We need to identify the sub-addiction. What is it providing? And then ultimately find and identify viable alternatives from that substance or from that behavior. Because ultimately, addiction and relapse is the individual has not found and identified a viable alternative for that. And so they just pursue it because it's the easiest. But someone who's got addiction and relapses, if they're aware of viable alternatives, they're not going to pursue that addictive behavior.
Yeah, I have a saying that I use a lot with my clients. And if any of them are listening to this, they're probably going to roll their eyes because they've heard it so many times. But I always say to them, there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's an opportunity to learn. Because I do get clients to fill in diet diaries, certainly when they start working with me. And quite often at the beginning, they go, oh, I had a really bad week. They're talking to me like I'm their teacher, right? And I've given them homework and the dog's eating the homework kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, look, I'm not your school teacher. I'm not going to put red ink on it. I'm just here to help you review what's happened. And then we're going to decipher the feedback between us. And then from there, we'll say, right, what can you do next time?
Right.
Right. There's no failure.
Yep.
It's only failure if you keep making the same mistake.
Or failure if you quit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Right. Just the last kind of big question, if you like.
Sure.
So you've got your Longevity Expo coming up in August.
I do.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, what to expect, and why these events are so important for the future of health and wellness?
Yeah, I have been pursuing speaking professionally and hosting events just because I love conveying a message. And I also really ultimately love bringing my teachers and my mentors onto a stage and providing them with a spotlight so I can pass on their information to my students and communities. So this event that I've created, I'm the founder of Canada's largest biohacking and wellness expo. It's called Longevity Summit Canada. It's a 3-day event, August 9th, 10th, and 11th in Toronto. And ultimately, the reason why I've created this event is to provide education and information for consumers to allow them, the tools necessary to pursue personal development and betterment and acquiring and investing in different health modalities after they've been educated and after they've been receiving sound information so that they can make a wise decision. Right now, with e-commerce and online and social media and influencers and all of these things pushing various products and systems and gizmos and gadgets, it's very difficult to identify what works and what doesn't work. There's just so much out there. It's very overwhelming. And I am a health enthusiast. I am a biohacker. I love pursuing things that can optimize my body. And I've been trying just a ton of different modalities and products and services and different lifestyle interventions. And I've been able to really, cut the confusion and incorporate it into my life. But again, there's just so much confusion out there. So this event, it is a 3-day event where the bulk of the speakers are my personal friends and teachers and mentors. And again, it's just my way of honoring them to give them a stage. And I just want them to convey their messages because ultimately their mission and vision is older than mine. And I'm not going to say grander than mine, but I want to help with their mission and vision. And ultimately it's getting them in front of an audience so they can teach. And then in return, the audience gets a lot of information and value. And I get to know that they've acquired sound education and information so that they can make wise decisions. Really to cut through the confusion. Like I said, there's just so many, bro science people out there talking all sorts of stuff. But I want to stand on the shoulders of giants. I want to learn from living legends. So this event, that's ultimately what it is. We've got over 60 vendors, all showcasing various products and services that I've vetted, and I'm confident that they have value. And then we've got a massive keynote stage with speakers from all around the world that are going to be speaking. And then we've got a beautiful VIP rooftop patio, which is really, really nice. There's going to be an IV lounge and all sorts of incredible biohacking pursuits of things to explore. So yeah, really, really excited to bring this to Canada because most of these events, typically they happen in United States. So bringing it north of Canada or north of the border is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, from our discussion today, I would say if you're inviting along people that you've learnt from, it's clearly going to be a very informative expo because, it's quite clear that, we're on very similar thought patterns, shall we say. Mm-hmm. But you're clearly, very intelligent guy. So if you're showcasing people that have taught you, I'm pretty confident it's going to be, very high quality expo. I'm actually teaching for the Czech Institute that weekend.
Beautiful.
But I was almost tempted myself to to come along because it sounds really great.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Awesome.
Well,
And I guess
maybe we'll get you there next year.
Maybe. And I guess, so it's over 3 days, but I guess people can go for 1 day or 2 days or 3 days.
Yep, that's right. So each day is different, completely different schedule. There's going to be workshops and keynote talks all day Monday or Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Dr. DeMartini's flying in from New York, so he's going to be keynote speaking on Monday. We've actually got Guinness Book of Records on Saturday, and I can't say what it is of the record that we're breaking, but it is a first of its kind. So really excited for that as well.
Well, a little bit of intrigue as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. So apart from the expo, what else have you got coming up? Anything in the pipeline?
Yeah, I speak, I teach. I've got classes online on Zoom, and then I've got various sessions in person. I've just acquired a new home that I'm going to be running my practice in for executives. I'm hosting retreats there, so people will be traveling in to see me. I also work with plant medicine. So just ongoing expansion of my practice. I've also created my flagship program, my Gut Reset program. That's turned into a certification program where I teach students ultimately how they can become approved gut health facilitators, where they can ultimately help their community, their clients in gut health And so it's in a 12-month curriculum. And after that, they get a business and they have confidence. And I've got confidence knowing that they can help individuals with complex gut-related cases or all health-related cases following my protocol. So it's pretty inspiring being able to just help people, and then it changes their life so much that they want to pursue ongoing education. So I've done both.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And where can people find you online, and where can people find details of the expo?
Sure. LongevitySummitCanada.com. That's the expo. They can email info@LongevitySummitCanada.com if they want to be a vendor, or if you know someone that might want to be a speaker or just attend. There's only maybe a couple speaker spots left. And then ultimately for my personal Instagram, you can just find me, The Gut Whisperer. I did not coin myself that. That's not my name. I was given that name by Bedros Keuilian. He's a pretty influential American in the health space. So he gave me that name on a coaching call. So there's that. And then I've got a YouTube channel, The Gut Whisperer. So you can just find me there easily.
Awesome. Great stuff. Brendan, thank you so much. I've absolutely loved talking to you. I could probably talk to you for hours. You look like a better looking brother of mine.
Well, I think, being able to follow some of the same teachings and some of the same philosophies, it's quite inspiring that we've got so many commonalities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's been great. Been great having you on.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your listenership and viewership. Thanks for having me.
So that's it from Brendan and me for this week. But don't forget to join me, same time, same place, next week on the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to give the show a rating and a review, and I'll see you next time.